خیلی ممنون از همه شما که اینجا با ما هستین. من یه بایو خلاصه که از دکتر اخباری میخونم. دکتر اخباری در تهران به دنیا آمدن و بعد از گذراندن دوره دبیرستان برای ادامه تحصیل به امریکا آمدن و موفق به دریافت کارشناسی ارشد در رشته مهندسی برق و الکترونیک در سال 1986 از دانشگاه کالارادو شدند. به مدت 20 سال در شرکت‌های هانیول، اینتل و موتورولا کار می‌کردند. یعنی بیسیکلی تمام شرکت‌های مهم امریکا. با کارهای تحقیقی، طراحی، تولیدی و مشورتی برای مدارهای الکترونیک با استفاده از تکنولوژی‌های مختلف مشغول بودند. پس از کنارگیری از کارهای بخش صنعتی به تحصیل در رشته روانشناسی بالینی ادامه دادند و در سال 2016 موفق شدند که تا در اریزونا سکول آف پروفشنال سایکولوژی at آرگوسی یونیورسیتی درجه دکترای خودشون رو در روانشناسی بگیرن. سپس دوره کارآموزی فشرده مورد تایید انجمن روانشناسان امریکا در سال 2017 به پایان رسوندن. در کنار تحصیلات رسمی و سابقه حرفه‌ای که دارند، داوطلبانه به فعالیت‌های فرهنگی، اجتماعی و مطالعه آثار گوناگون ادبی تاریخی ایران هم پرداختند و بیشتر به روی شاهنامه فردوسی، مثنوی معنوی مولانا و تاریخ ایران از دوره باستان تا کنون کار کردند. از جمله سرگرمی‌های ایشان تهیه و گردآوری و استفاده از کتاب‌های چاپ نفیس درباره هنر ایشان است. من توی کلاس‌های متفاوت دکتر اخباری رو شاهد بودم که هم راجع به کتاب‌های مهم ایران میدونن این دپت و بررسی میکنن، بحث میکنن. روانشناسی هم که دکتراشو دارن و من خیلی خوشحالم که دعوتمون رو قبول کردید راجع به این موضوع بسیار مشکل این روزای ما صحبت بکنم. ممنون از همه دوستانی که با ما هستن. سلام میکنم به کسانی که ندیدمشون قبلش. خیلی خیلی ممنون. من امشب دکتر نواب من یه جای دیگه ساین کردن که حدود 7:50 میرم و آتوس جان یا دکتر مالک اگر تشریف آوردن سوالا رو منیج میکنم. خیلی خیلی ممنون. مرسی. متشکرم. اگر بفرمایید.
سلام دوباره خدمت همه دوستان عزیز. خیلی خوشحالم که دوباره در جمع شما هستم و یک سری مطالبی که به احتمال قوی شما همه اطلاع دارید آماده کردم که خدمتتون تقدیم میکنم. از خانم دکتر مدنی خیلی سپاسگزارم که به بنده اجازه میدن که من این مطالب رو تقدیم شما بکنم. خانم آتوسا پایگانی که همیشه مورد محبت ایشون قرار داشتم، کمک های مربوطه از نظر تکنیکی بازم سپاسگزاری میکنم. برنامه صحبت امشب رو چون یک صحبتی که جمع‌آوری یه سری مدارک و یه سری اطلاعات از ادبیات که در مجله‌های مختلف روانشناسی آمریکا چاپ شده و من اونا رو برای شما گردآوری کردم و یه جوری تنظیم کردم که قابل استفاده باشه، بیشتر از زبان‌های تکنیکی زیاد استفاده نشه. این بود که من اینها رو امشب متاسفانه همه رو به زبان انگلیسی خدمت شما تقدیم خواهم کرد، ولی شما به زبان فارسی یا انگلیسی میتونین از من سوال بکنین یا ابراز نظر بکنین یا هر جوری که میل خودتون هست. بنابراین با اجازه شما من این مطالب رو شروع میکنم. سعی میکنم به کمی آهسته تر پیش برم که دوستان همه بتونن که از این مطالب استفاده کنن. عرضم به حضور شما The topic of tonight's presentation revolves around the upheaval, the situation that we are in the whole world and how the whole world will affect us. So I titled it as the effect of the world in upheaval on human psyche, but it could be on anybody's mind and anybody's situation. So no part of this presentation is generated using artificial intelligence-based application. They're mostly drawn from the current literature on the psychology or the study of psychiatric disorders. This is an interesting quote from Dr. Viktor Frankl. If you don't know him, he was a prominent psychologist, one of the principal investigators and developer of the School of Humanists, and I think it was the University of Berkeley. He passed away a couple of years ago. His assertion is very interesting. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior from his point of view. So if I have a problem and somebody exerts pressure on me, the reaction that I produce is a normal reaction. It's what you should be expecting. It should not be a normal reaction. The outline of the program that I have, first I will spend some time on the motivation. I'll discuss with you what the motivation for this talk is. Then I'll describe about a normal society, because I want to work on a society which is not normal, which is disturbed. Excuse me. And then how is a normal society disturbed? The characteristics of a society under collective stress and collective trauma. I will describe these 2 points, these 2 expressions, collective stress and collective trauma, later on. Then changes that we will incur as a result of this collective stress and then collective trauma. Then we will probably want to consider what would be the treatment and resolution of the collective trauma. If this is a complex task, is it an easy task, or how is it done? Then I'll close with a summary, and there is a table of references in case you want to look at it later on. Well, the motivation for this presentation is that, as you know, we are living in a very crisis-oriented and crisis-overwhelmed era. There is not a day or an hour that we hear some bad news from a war, from a disaster, from a strike, from a social injustice that may be going around. And we are becoming very mindful of all these discomfort that we are feeling about, when we hear this news, or somehow maybe we are going to be also involved in it too. The whole package of news media, the social media, is very much involved in these things, and we all have access to this kind of a media, and we somehow are not able to stay away from it per se, by default. There is also a view of an uncertain future as to what's going to happen, because the horizon is not very clear. We cannot see clear enough, and the players keep changing. The leaders, the politicians, and the influencers, they keep changing. So it is not clear what's going to happen, and the horizon is not clear. So as a result, we are seeing that some societies, it does not have to be a large society. It could be a small society. It could be a city, a population in the city, population in the state, the country, the continent, may feel confused about what's going on and what direction to take. And this is on the shoulders of the leaders to clarify these things and to empower the people that this is the right path to go, and kind of assure them about the travel and this trip, that we are all in it. So we can still continue with the direction that we have set for ourselves, to the life goals that we have decided. Next, I will be spending time on the expected reaction to collective trauma, and focus on of course, all of the discussion here would be based on non-political and non-religious kind of like a talk or involvement, mostly on the psychological issues. So the point is that once we recognize the psychological issues, we can move over and decide on what can we expect from around us and from the world that we live in. The synopsis would be focusing on collective and diverse societies, whether they are large or small. So I would not be spending time on the impact on the individual people, just because all of these things are already published and they have talked about many times by different people, and they have been documented. So this area of focusing on a society or a group or a large group of people is pretty new in the literature. The literature has been, the extent of the investigations and the research on the impact of the trauma on large groups is not very, does not have a long history behind it. It's very new. So I'll be spending on this one, which is a new subject to me. And it is a new subject to me, is probably a new subject to you too. The standard manual and reference for psychologists and psychiatrists is the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is called by acronyms DSM. This one, if you have a copy of these things, you can buy it. If you have a copy of these things, all the different disorders, all the emotional and mental disorders that you might imagine have been documented and listed here. And this is actually used by psychologists and psychiatrists to report it to the insurance companies to get reimbursed. But essentially, it does not cover anything about the group or collective mental health problems or issues. And it is pretty much silent on these things. The reason is probably there has not been much of the research that has been evidence-based, or a lot of group of people who have been participating on this kind of studies. So the current research describes and defines the collective state of mental health and a couple of important factors that that the society will be considering in order to feel if it is a healthy society, it's a healthy approach or not. The two salient factors that they usually emphasize are cognition and emotion. I will talk about, and I'll define these things, and I'll talk about these things later on. Cognition, actually, it refers to the means of thinking, memory, and decision-making, and all the other tools that our psyche would have at its disposal to find and analyze a situation. So that's the whole thing is called the cognition. So your cognitive power depends on how precisely and sharply you can focus and put your mind into thinking and working and analyzing without feeling distorted, without having any misinformation or disinformation leaking into your path of thinking. Emotion reflects the state of mental health. So emotions points out to the state of the mental health for the people who become subject or impacted by the trauma that we have around ourselves. Okay, so we're going to start with the normal, because we have to have a baseline. And when we talk about disturb and the trauma and the word in upheaval, so what would be a normal place? What would be a normal society? A normal society is a society in which people are successfully involved with resolving different challenges, a meaningful life, and social mental health issues, and they benefit from the support of the government or non-governmental groups, NGOs, that would participate productively and satisfactorily to resolve and support their issues. So a normal society is not a calm or a dead society. Normal society is a society which is active and which is healthy and which is productive, and they have problems and they have issues, but they don't get bogged down in their problems and issues. It does not turn into criminal issues. It does not turn into legal issues. However, people are able to solve those issues and move on. I will call that a normal society. It's an active, it's a lively society. So Some of the distinguishing characters of a normal society from the cognitive and emotion point of view are it's a calm, it's a motivated, it's a balanced, well-planned and executed, functional, orderly, competitive, peaceful, lawful, and interconnected one. The last one is one of the most important. So everybody is interconnected to each other in this kind of a society. So what is a disturbed society? Now that we know what's a normal society, we want to contrast this thing against the normal society to see what is what has been done to it. A disturbed society is a normal society that stressful and traumatic events have impacted a large group of people in that society. So you can consider a city, you can consider a country, you can consider a continent, but a large number of people must be behaving in a very abnormal way, in a very stressful way. So the stressful experience what happens is going to lead to short-term cognitive and emotional issues. Also, the traumatic experience will lead to long-term and highly complex cognitive and emotional challenges. So the difference here is that between the stressful experience and between the traumatic experience. Stressful experience is with the short-term, and it is very less complex issues. And traumatic experience is very large and complex issues and long-term length of activation and experience. So those are the two differences that we want to talk about, stressful and traumatic. So some of the salient characteristics of the disturbed societies, again, from the cognitive and emotional perspective, is that a disturbed society collectively, it's confused, it's erratic, it's indifferent, it's lawless, violent. You can see vindictive attitudes. You can see people with a lot of aggressiveness. So how a normal society is disturbed? So we have a normal society and we have a disturbed society, and we want to know how a normal society becomes a disturbed society. Based on the collective stress, which is, as I mentioned, a short-term and limited intensity. As a result of the collective stress, the natural disasters like fire, flood, earthquakes, tornadoes, polar vortex, etc., industrial accidents, chemical, nuclear, oil spills, so on, environmental accidents, pollution, which is air, water, soil, and human-caused disasters like pandemics, like crimes, mass shootings, financial crisis, etc. These are the elements that may drive a normal society to become a collectively stressed society. Now, if you notice, most of these issues, they could be short term. Like the fire is not going to be burning the jungles for 10 years or 15 years, or the environmental accidents, air pollution or water pollution or other things are not going to be a long, stretch for a long time. And also the amount of the intensity would be rather local to the local community. The whole country or the whole state or the whole city will not be on fire or will not have a nuclear accident. So these are mostly localized issues. And that's what we call collective stress at this point. So for the longer term and more complex, very convoluted type of traumas, we have collective trauma versus collective stress. So in this case, it's like war for the countries who are invaded. It takes a long time. It's not like about 2 weeks or 2 hours, and nobody comes and put the fire out. It may take about a couple of years before it's over. Revolution, which is very much, sometimes in some of the countries, many years has taken for the revolution to calm down. Massacres, atrocities, kidnapping, prison torture, economic disasters like the bank failures, or like the whole economic system failure, like the 1929 in the United States. Land occupation, when another country occupies the land of another country, when a country occupies the land of another country. And then it gets into the uprooting of the population to other places. So the uprooting of the population is a kind of a collective trauma. Now, from the social order point of view, oppression, famine, suppression. Suppression is mostly like hindering people from getting involved into their, for example, suspending election somewhere. So that's a suppression of the rights, okay? Oppression has to do with mostly with the social justice, when people are discriminated for a long time, or they have been denied their rights of participating, or like, for example, an apartheid system. So we have a collective trauma and collective stress at this point, these two situations, these two domains. So what would be a characteristics of a society under collective stress? It is defined as a group of people experiencing a brief, significant traumatic event, all of them together. As I mentioned, in large societies, most of them should be involved, most of them should be impacted, which would cause collective stress and potential emotional distress. It often leads to shared psychological symptoms. Most of the people in that society, in that group, in that large group, will share the same kind of symptoms roughly, like anxiety, like fear, and like vulnerability. The overall stress response is usually amplified within the group of people who are subject to collective stress. They start feeding each other about the experience that they have, about anxiety, fear, and other situations. So this is another characteristic of a society under collective stress. So under collective trauma, it is defined as an aggregate of the trauma experience by community members or an event that impacts a large number of people, but has a structural and social traumatic consequences. So by that we mean under collective stress, people feel some psychological symptoms of different issues that they may have. Under the collective trauma, they not only feel that one, however, they feel that there is a structural problem, that the social interconnection is going to be affected, and they are going to be interrupted. Now, collective trauma is both natural, it happens within the natural and within the man-made disasters. And it could have a very severe impact on the family and community structures. And I will talk about these things later on. So under collective trauma, which is a community trauma also in the literature, it's called community trauma as well. Symptoms can be categorized as these three levels. It could be physical, means it definitely has to do with our sense of being physically healthy. So public places or public structures like schools, like hospitals, like roads may be damaged or unavailable or you cannot find food, you cannot find other things that you may need to preserve your status of healthy, physical health. I'm sorry. And then there's a social cultural, which is in relations to a social relations and social capital, which is a low sense of collective political and society efficacy, and has a widespread sense of fear and shame. So in that sense, when the social cultural is structure interrupted or damaged, the social relationship and social relation and network is damaged, then people start losing their support system, their social support system, and they start feeling fear and shame about why they have been in that situation and what has happened to them. A lot of questions and a lot of state of uncertainty. Economic and educational, that has to do with the generation to generation poverty and lack of access to the employment, to jobs, and or to other community supported help that would upgrade their level of social standing. So it would be pretty much a deep poverty. So these people will grow and they will be in these situations for a long time without having access to help themselves. So they remain to be dependent and helpful and out of loop. So under collective trauma, I want to continue by saying that it is when people are caught in the or impacted by the collective trauma, some of the minorities in that population, they start feeling disproportionately impacted with respect to the rest of the community. And because they are less powerful than the other members of the community, so they may be subject to violence, to discrimination, to further oppression, and additional poverty. It can contribute to the likelihood of migration. When people are in situations that they experience collective trauma, they may want to move on because there is nothing there for them. So they may want to move and migrate from one area to another area with the hope of finding some sort of a hopeful future or hope in the future. So in that sense, when they start migrating and they take the roads and long roads and very difficult tasks, they start feeling PTSD. They start feeling depression, depletion of social capital, and dysfunctional family dynamics because some may leave, some may take on the task of hitting the roads, and some family members may stay behind. And also some may feel a loss of motivation about what's going on. If I'm getting to the border and I'm driven back, so what do I do now? So there is a tremendous risk in the loss of motivation. Social capital has to do with the investment in the social structure of the society, how connected you are to the society. So when a group of people are interrupted and they are forced to leave and take off, they lose their connections to the person that they knew in that society. Like they knew who was the shopkeeper for that business. I mean, who was their friend, who was their family, who was their neighbors, who was protecting them. They lose track of it. So they lose the social capital that they provided themselves. There are increased levels of dependence because they are going to be all on their own, all gone on the road without motivations, without any connections. they would feel helpless. They will feel sometimes very hostile, very angry. They would not trust many people. They would be very suspicious of what may happen or who's going to be following them or accompanying them. And there's going to be a general feeling of despair. This is the result of a society with under collective trauma. So to continue with the collective trauma, there is an important point that the research, this is done by a psychiatrist and in a neuropsychological publication. She showed, Dr. Yehuda mentioned after studying a group of people from the Holocaust disaster in Europe, that the feeling and the issues, the psychological problems that they experience have been transmitted generation to generation, even within those people who are not in that environment any longer, even with the people who have migrated to Europe or to the United States. There is a transmission of trauma. This is an important and very drastic impact of people who are subject to collective trauma. So, what kind of a change in cases of cognition and emotions are involved? People who are subjected to the trauma, either collective trauma or collective stress, they feel impaired as far as using their skills, executive function to maneuver and solve problems. So the executive function is the CEO of the brain, which helps to resolve, and it comes into place when they want to resolve issues, even control emotions, and sometimes think or distinguish what is the pathway, or help the people analyze the situations. So that executive function would be the first to be impaired, not shut down, impaired, not functioning efficiently or effectively. Then there is a limited access to memory. Memory and the working memory and the functional memory, they also become available on a limited basis. Like people would forget when they are on the road and they are going from places to places, and they decide on leave or take another route, or what to do, and what path they should be going, and what they have to remember about these things. Their memory becomes impacted by this cognitive issues that they have. The next one is the exposure to chronic stress will contribute considerably to the development of cognitive impairment in psychiatric disorders. So if they have, or if they are diagnosed with some sort of a psychiatric disorder, like depression, generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, or any kind of other things like addictive behavior, these situations and these disorders would be strengthened, would become worse than what it is. So that's another issue with people who are turned around, and or they have been under the traumatic situations. They will feel that their mental disorders would start to act up and give them more problems. And so that's another aspect of the fact that the cognitions would be impaired and emotions would be elevated in this sense. So how do we resolve the collective trauma? First of all, unfortunately, there is a lack of in-depth research to study and find ways of separating different things from the trauma at this point. There are major challenges and long-term involvements once people start to address their collective trauma. The collective stress is not that much of a problem at this point because many research and long time investigation has been invested to find ways of treating it on a behavioral basis or on a medical basis. But the to resolve the collective trauma or the symptoms of the collective trauma, there has to be a long way and a lot of effort to be spent on these things. There has to be a development of social capital and networking. So imagine those people who are in that situations, they have to start find their friends, find their connections within the society, find their network, or even a small network or a large network from wherever they are. So this would enable them to find their way around, to see where they are in this world, and start networking and use those connections to help themselves find their way out or lessen their pain of suffering that they have. Then there was a paper that somebody suggested that there has to be an effort in social construction of meaning. Means, so by that we mean to find out how to build reasons, how to come up with reasons, and how to build structures, mental structures, to make meaning of the life. So what would be the next goal? What would be the next target? And how to address it, and how to propose it and construct it in order to help them out of this mode of total cognitive vacuum, so to speak. Now they have to learn also to start thinking and using their executive functions in a conscious way, so they can realize the power of the executive functions, how powerful they are, how much they can focus on their thinking and their ability to solve problems and to find solutions. Then another approach would be to plan or attempt to find out how to survive. The survival is the master key in the reserve and in the return to normalcy. I noticed in another country that they were hit with a small island which was hit with earthquake, severe earthquake. All the buildings and all the primitively constructed habitats were destroyed. They fell off. And there were a group of people in the US who volunteered to go to that area, to that island, to give them support and give them instructions and help them around and kind of guide them with their own skills. So I was very curious how these people could be helped when they lost their habitat. So one of them, I heard one of the interviews of one of these people, the social support, would say that, okay, we are not going to go there and then build it ourselves. We're going to go there and then help them to find the skills that they have to build their own houses and help each other and see who is able to do what and how can we benefit from his skills or her skills in getting the life back together. So this is an example of developing social capital and networking. So these people with more or less would return to normalcy. Now, on top of everything else, there is always room for recuperations, all sort of mindfulness and psychological relaxations and artwork and art shop to relieve this stress and trauma, not to destroy it, but to relieve it. So the objective is to return to functionality, not to healing, to functionality. Okay, this has been a interesting approach from the point of view to address the cognitive and emotion part of the traumas. So we basically we felt that we are mentioned that we are all very much mindful of various severe accidents and incidents that are going on around the world, and we are impacted by the severity of those events. Social and news media are all around us, and they are bombarding us with all sorts of anecdotes and examples and pictures and news and voice about this trauma that has happened around us or near us or away from us. So we cannot stay away from it. It doesn't matter how far it is. It is right in our hand and on our desk, so we can watch it every day and every night. We discussed the psychological trauma for the group of individuals, not for the individuals, for the group of them. Serious consequences of what the collective stress and what the collective trauma would impose. And then discussions from cognitive and emotion perspective on what may happen and how the things will be impacting different societies as a whole, and how they could be recognized and characterized. Now, again, we are still waiting for the research to conclude the efforts in order to produce an effective and meaningful treatment for cognitive trauma and the people who are involved with it. It is still pending and it is in progress. These are the references, some of the references that I have used, and I'm just going to appreciate the time that you spend with me. You've been very patient, very kind and generous with your time. And I'm just going to open it up. If you have any questions, if you want to make any comments, or if you have anything that would help me to get this thing done better the next time. از شما خیلی ممنون هستم که با شکیبایی خودتون همراه من بودید و من اجازه دادید که این بحث نسبتاً پیچیده رو آسان‌تر بکنم و در خدمت شما هستم. خیلی ممنون. تشکر میکنم.
خیلی ممنون دکتر اخباری. همونجور که شما صحبت میکردی، زندگی خودم، بقیه فامیل، دوستان و ما چطوری اینجا 40 و چند 50 ساله قبل از حالا من اومدم چطوری تونستیم سروایو کنیم، چطوری خودمون رو جمع کردیم، چطوری تو لس آنجلس یه پرژن سکوئر داریم، یه نمیدونم پرژن تاون داریم، whatever، یا مثلا توی لس آنجلس توکیو تاون هست and what we have gone through. خیلی ممنون و از همه دوستانی که با ما امشب هستن متشکرم. انشاءالله بازم ببینیمتون.